Hello and welcome to another episode of the FemiNinja Project, and thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And as always, I have a spectacular guest with me today. He has an amazing story that he's going to share with us. His name is Kellan Fluckiger. He is a coach, speaker, award-winning author, podcast host, alchemist for exponential personal growth, and he is the founder of Your Ultimate Life, which helps people create their purpose, prosperity, and joy every day of their lives by serving with their gifts and talents. Kellan also struggled with depression, addiction, a near-death experience, and lived to become a beacon of light for others. He has written 18 books. He's working on 2 more, many of them becoming #1 Amazon bestsellers, has recorded 82 songs, and performed with a #1 Billboard charting choir in Phoenix, Arizona. My goodness, Kellan, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. And I first want to acknowledge you, and I'm very grateful for the work that you are doing. We have so much darkness and discouragement. Your effort, podcasts are a labor of love, and I just want to honor you for the work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you. I really do appreciate that because it definitely is a labor of love. But what keeps me going and kind of has me addicted to podcasting now is the amazing people that I meet and the incredible stories that I hear from my guests. Just is so overwhelming and so positive and so uplifting. No matter what they've gone through, they've always managed a way to come through the dark times and into the light. So thank you for being here and sharing your story with my audience, because I know they're going to love to hear it.
Well, I'm glad. Anyway, thank you.
Okay, so just tell us how you got to where you are right now, because you did go through some dark times. You can start wherever you want to, and just take us on that journey of what life was like for you and how you got to where you are now.
So I'm going to start at the beginning. Sometimes I start at the middle and work in both directions, but I'm not going to do that today. I grew up in a 2-parent home that would have looked from outside like it was kind of normal. The truth was that I had a lot of discipline that today would be felony child abuse. And it was based on sort of a religious bent. And so the reason that matters is there's nothing wrong with the religion. My mother particularly was the disciplinarian, and she got married too young and didn't know how to raise kids. And her idea of making things right was through force. And so I remember even as late as high school going to getting dressed last in the locker room because I didn't want people to see I was black and blue. And I was ashamed of it, you know. And so I grew up believing with all my heart there was something wrong with me, that I was fundamentally flawed, and that my best use of life would be to prove to my mother that I was okay. And you would think that growing up, I left home at 17, and you would think that when you get out of that place, you would somehow take control and get over it. And I didn't. I just believed, because she had God on her side in my mind, that you know, she was right and I was just wrong. Everything that I did was wrong. And she that left over. So it imprinted me, and I left that. So for the next 35 years, from 17 to 52, I lived a roller coaster life, struggling with depression, which I never got help for. I never went to talk to somebody because I believed that all the problems were mine. And if I just would get my crap together, I was okay. That led me on a journey of self-sabotage. So I would create big success, where I get a good job and get up in the company and make good money. And then I would believe, well, I don't deserve to be here. So I would trash it. And, you know, that sort of upper limit belief, it ended up costing me 3 relationships. I was married and divorced 3 times over those 35 years.
Wow.
I have 10 children. I was in and out of rehab. I was a drug addict, off and on, different addictions, and even attempted suicide a couple times. So that journey was all found. I never had sense enough to go get help. I believed that it needed not to be, because part of the upbringing was you don't talk about things, right? And so I just didn't. and believed that it wasn't good, because any talking to someone else would be blaming others and it was really all my fault. That kind of thing. If you go talk to somebody, then it must be because you're trying to escape your responsibilities. And saying that all in retrospect sounds warped, and it is, but that's the life that I lived. And so each successive time up and down the roller coaster got bigger. And what I mean by that is I made more money, because the one thing I knew how to do was make money. So I made more money, got higher positions, and I ended up having, C-suite positions in the United States and in Canada. Testified before Congress. I had a contract with Her Late Majesty the Queen, kind of thing, and had some very high profile positions. Behind the scenes, I was a personal wreck, not always an addict, but often enough that I went to secret rehabs that, only those kind of people go to, that kind of thing, and so forth. And that went on and on until I was in 2007. I was at the top of one of those roller coasters. I was single again for the third time. I had 4 of my 10 children living with me as a single dad.
Wow.
3 of them were grown up and married, and 3 of them were with, and it's embarrassing to say this, my exes. I was a $3,000 a week cocaine addict, and I was making so much money that didn't matter.
Wow.
So that's Kellan in August of 2007. And the details for the 35 years that I just sort of covered are all about the same. I would have periods of sobriety and do really well. This crazy self-sabotage longing would set in, and I didn't have names for it then. See, I've learned a lot since 2007 in the 15, now coming on 16 years since then. But at the time, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't understand it. I tried, I thought I was trying to be okay. And then there were these just yearnings and stuff, and I created self-sabotage. So I trashed the relationships, trashed the jobs, and I had a habit of attracting broken people. One of the women that I married had been raised by an alcoholic stepdad, and another one, her mother had committed suicide. But I did not know what that sort of thing did to people. And so I didn't help. I didn't do anything to help that. I didn't know. So I just sort of did what I knew how to do, which was make money. I'm sure I was a crappy partner. I never learned to be a friend or to have a friend. I was a pathological liar, which I learned to do as a kid to protect myself. And so that just you'd sort of go along in these vacuous sort of circumstances until something fails. And that's what I did over and over again. So in August of 2007, everything suddenly changed. And so that's when I had.
Can I interrupt
Yeah,
for
go ahead.
just one moment? Because along with the self-sabotage and your upbringing, was there a certain amount of self-loathing as well?
Thank you. You're perceptive and right. People ask me all the time, what was your drug of choice? And the answer is, whatever was handy. The big one, the expensive one, was cocaine, but alcohol, every drug you ever heard of. The real addiction was to self-loathing. I needed a reason to hate myself, and wrecking the relationships, and, even to the point of, like I said, I attempted suicide twice. That was all the need to hate me. So it didn't matter which drug it was. It wasn't like I got to have this one. It didn't matter.
Right.
Whatever's handy. Wasting money, and addiction to shopping, spending money I didn't even need, and I had more than I knew what to do with. All of it was the need to hate myself. So absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you for answering that. I really appreciate it. So continue. I think we're at 2007. Is that correct?
Yeah, August of 2007. I came home from work on a Friday night, getting ready to go out and party for the weekend, and the 4 kids I had with me were all near graduation from high school, or already graduated, so they were old enough. And I thought that money solved everything anyway, so I wasn't paying any attention. Anyway, on that Friday night, suddenly I had this urge to turn on the television. Now, that doesn't sound like anything, except I don't watch TV. And I had the biggest stuff you could buy. I had some electronics outfit come and put it in, but I picked up the remote and realized I don't know how to turn this on. So I asked one of my kids, my 16-year-old daughter, she punched the buttons and threw the remote at me and left the room, and it landed on a program I'd never heard of, and I don't know that it's on anymore, but it was a reality TV show called Intervention. And it is a program about families who stage interventions for busted loved ones. And so I watched about 10 minutes, and the protagonist was a high-ranking executive with a cocaine problem. So I watched about 10 minutes and I said, I'm this crap. And I turned it off and did some other stuff. And I felt compelled to turn on the TV again. So this time I knew how. So I turned it on, and that program started over. And no, I don't have a recording device. And no, it wasn't on the schedule. And no, it can't do that. I understand. But it did. And I thought, oh, crap. So I watched it, and it went poorly. The guy yelled at his family and swore he didn't have a problem, and you know the drill, stomped out and everything else. But it freaked me out, so that I didn't go out. Instead of going out to party, I went to bed. When I went to bed, I went to hell. What I mean by that is it felt like I was out of body. It felt I was in a big dark room. I could hear voices and see a stage kind of thing. And the scenes on the stage were all focused on suffering. The suffering that I had received had been inflicted on a kid all those years, up through all the suffering I had inflicted on everybody else as a failure in every material respect. And it went on for, it was more intense than I know how to describe, and it went on forever. And after a long time, a voice said, "It is enough." I woke up and I was disoriented because the sun was shining in the windows and the windows faced west. So I got up and realized it was 5 o'clock Saturday afternoon. So I'd been somewhere for nearly 18 hours. And I got up and realized I'd been invited to change. And I didn't know I didn't know what to do. I didn't have any idea where to start or anything, but I thought, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm done with this. So I threw away $1,000 or so worth of stuff I had laying around, quit cold turkey that day. So that got me sober, but it didn't do anything to do with the self-loathing or the depression or how I got there in the first place. That shoe dropped 2 weeks later. In the position that I had, I used to get all kinds of free stuff because I made decisions that affected a lot of companies, and often billions of dollars were at stake. And so people gave me free tickets to this and free expensive bottles of booze, like I needed that, and all that sort of stuff. And one of the things I got was a pair of tickets to see a Yo-Yo Ma concert. And if you know classical music, you know who that is. And if you don't, you don't. But in classical circles, that's like, I mean, he's the cellist, but he's beyond spectacular. But anyway, so I thought, oh, this is great. But I don't want to waste this other ticket. And I had no one to take and wasn't interested in any of that. So I asked in the groups of people that I manage who likes classical music. Some lady in one of the groups said, well, I do. And I said, have I ever given you anything before? She said, no. I said, okay, fine. Here you go. So I gave her the ticket, and we met at the venue. And the concert was spectacular, electrifying. And halfway through, now you got to know, the date of the concert, I'm 2 weeks stone cold sober. Okay. And halfway through the concert, I had this feeling, and this voice, which I recognized, said to me, you need to marry this woman. And I said, you're insane. I said, I've screwed that up 3 times officially and some other atrocious messes in between. I said, that's just not happening. Later that night, we were backstage because the tickets were like $1,000 tickets and included receptions and the backstage pass, everything. So we're backstage at the reception, and this voice came back and said, comma, and you need to tell her tonight. And I thought, okay, there's some real problems with this. First of all, I actually don't know very much about her, and I don't know if she's in a relationship.
Mhm.
I don't know I don't. And besides that, she could have me arrested for harassment. There is that. And so that, no, this isn't happening. But you don't win those arguments. So I did, and it went about like you would have expected.
Mhm.
Are you insane?
Mhm.
Like, what are you thinking? What are you talking about? But she didn't call the cops, and she wasn't in a relationship, neither of which I knew. Within about 2 weeks, she had her own set of experiences. And a couple of weeks later, I resigned, walked away from millions of dollars of contracts, and she walked away from her entire career. And we walked off into the sunset. And about 3 months ago, we celebrated 15 years of marriage, our 15th wedding anniversary. The reason,
Congratulations.
yeah, I know. The reason that matters is the story by itself is incredible. But what matters is she was literally, and I mean that in the most literal sense, the angel that was sent
Mhm.
to help me learn how to have a friend, to be a friend, to learn how to be a person, learn how to tell the truth, which I'd never done.
Mhm.
She found me people to talk to. She was just invincible in her work. And I've asked her at least dozens of times since then, what on earth prompted you to walk away from your career and off into the sunset with a drug addict? Because
Mhm.
everybody knew. I mean, they didn't know, but they knew, right? And she said, I don't know. I just knew to the core of my soul it was the right thing to do. So, and we spent the first 4 or 5 years getting to know each other, which we didn't
Mhm.
very much. And so those the typical kinds of things. And I had to go see a million different counselors and just start really with the work of what I had never done before. And this is at 52. And since that time, I walked away from the industry and everything. I began life over again, began writing. I decided after some, time that working, helping people realize who they really are and what they are
Mhm.
capable of was not only a calling for me, but a gift that I
Mhm.
have. And so, using my talents, I have a voice, which is
Mhm.
powerful. I have a presence, which is powerful, which is how
Mhm.
I got everything I got in the corporate and everything else world. Um, I just met a guy yesterday here at this conference. Never met him before in my life. And after we talked for about 15 minutes, he said to the person who had introduced us, he said, I understand now. He has these eyes,
Mhm.
and he called them CEO eyes. He said, no wonder. He said,
Mhm.
right through me.
Mhm.
And so anyway, I decided and knew and understood that the gifts that I had were to be used in the service of people to help them understand who they really are. And so
Mhm.
that was the beginning in 2007 to now. For the
Mhm.
last 15 years, we've been building writing, building a coaching practice, and have clients around the world, and
Mhm.
and creating
I
the music which you have heard. So
I want to go back to at the age of 52, you started counseling and started doing the really hard work. Was that incredibly intimidating at first? Was it terrifying or was it liberating? I mean, just the thought of starting that journey, I think, would have taken an awful lot of courage and faith.
well, I knew I wasn't going to be the other person. And I didn't know what I needed to do. I don't know
Mhm.
what this is going to take. I don't know where I have to go. When I wrote Tightrope of Depression,
Mhm.
my journey from darkness, despair, and death to light, love, and life, after I finished it, I waited a year to publish it because I was so scared of telling the truth. Because in
Mm.
that, and there were still people in the industry who knew me, and no one. So I waited a year to publish it, and my family, and I expected all kinds of repercussions, and some of them came. So yeah, to start with, when I went to counselors, I didn't know how to tell them the truth either. I was
Mhm.
so used to being in charge of everything that
Mhm.
I was in charge of that too. And so I would tell things and then I would analyze it all and tell them everything. And finally, they might say something, and I'm sure they thought I was crazy. So it took me, I don't know, 30 or 40 or 50 sessions and half a dozen people before I finally stopped doing that.
Mhm. I love, not really love, but it just really resonated with me when you talked about having the book written and then not publishing it for a year. Because when you're putting your story out there for the world to hear, once it's out there, it's out there. And you cannot get the genie back in the bottle.
No.
Once it was published, for the first, let's just say first couple of weeks or month, or maybe even longer, that it, after it was published, did you have one of those, oh my gosh, what have I done to myself moments? Did you have
No,
any
I
writer's
just
remorse?
decided no. It was
Okay.
done. I did during the year, but
Mhm.
after I published it, it was done and I was just going to do whatever it was. I'm not a My nature is one that when I've decided, I'm done. I've
Mhm.
decided and it's over. I did it and I'm moving forward. And I'm going to handle whatever happens, but I'm not going to worry about the decision because it's done.
Mhm. And was that your first book that you
No,
published?
I wrote the first books I wrote was a 5-volume series on meditation that
Uh-huh.
I wrote in the context of a course on meditation that I was creating. So I created some meditation music in the studio and wrote a 5-volume series on meditation. And that
Mhm.
was those are the first.
Mhm.
After that, then the next book I wrote was Tightrope.
Okay. There's, if I may, because I can't tell all the titles of your books because you have so many of them, but the ones that really just kind of jumped out at me, and really made me want to hear more was, what was Down from the Gallows. I thought that was a really compelling title.
Down from the Gallows is volume 2. So I wrote Tightrope of Depression.
Hmm.
And when I wrote it, I realized I also wanted to tell stories through music. So I wrote an album of music and recorded it called Name of the Black. And the songs on that album are the dark songs, the stories of the truth of what I lived. Then I knew I hadn't planned on writing more than one book. I'm done. I wrote my story and that's it.
Hmm.
I mean, about me. I had
Hmm.
planned to write books, but no more about me. And when I got done with Tightrope, I realized I'm just getting organized. So then Down from the Gallows is volume 2 and follows Tightrope. And I also wrote another 11 songs on an album called Promise and Power, which tells stories of hope and recovery that go with Down from the Gallows.
Hmm.
Volume 3 is the last one. That's one of the two that'll be finished this year. And it also has 15 songs that I'm about half done doing. So the last uh, book in the Tightrope trilogy, and I have decided that that's it, is going to be finished this year along with the music
Hmm.
for that. So Down from the Gallows is the subtitle is The Truth, the Myth, and Battles of a Creative with Depression.
Hmm.
And it is from the perspective, see, Tightrope was telling the story of what happened and included the 2007 thing and some years after that of then when I was done, I mean, it had to have an end somewhere. I realized that the daily process, which is what we
Hmm.
talked about a little ahead of time, the
Hmm.
daily process of living and understanding and creating momentum and motion is
Hmm.
still a daily process. And
Hmm.
so that's why the subtitle is The Truth, the Myth, and Battles of a Creative with Depression, because it was has lots of little vignettes and examples. I think there's
Hmm.
nearly 100 chapters, short ones of just
Hmm.
stuff that happens
Hmm.
externally and internally. Things like after my brother finally read it, a Tightrope, he disinvited us to the family reunion because he was worried that my presence would be negative for the nieces and nephews, and so that sort of thing. And those things all happened during the years after Tightrope. And so anyway, all of that was in Down from the Gallows, and that ended at a certain time too, a year or two ago.
Mhm.
And so that, just enough. So I finished it, and the third volume, like I said, will be out later this year.
Two questions. First of all, if you had known that that was going to happen, would you have still published the books?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
I
I
don't need to
figured.
worry about. Here's something that I have learned that I'll share with your readers.
Mhm.
What other people think of you is none of your business. And that's a Byron Katie quote, which I
Mhm.
love. It just, look, you can't, first of all, you don't know.
Mhm.
Making up stories about what you think they think, I've turned that into a disease, and it's the Witot fungus, and
Mhm.
it kills more people than COVID ever will, and it stands for what I think others think.
Mhm.
And so that's an acronym, WITOT, the Witot fungus. You don't know what they think, and what they think is a function of their lenses on life anyway,
Mhm.
which you don't control. So
Mhm.
spending any amount of time worrying about what somebody thinks of you is a waste of time, a waste of your precious life, and
Mhm.
doesn't matter anyway.
Mhm. Amen. Okay, thank you for saying that. And then my follow-up question was, if you don't stop at this third book, let me know, because I'm really curious if this really is going to be the third one, or if you're going to, continue the momentum. I'm just curious.
Well, I'm not done writing books,
Oh,
just
I
in
know
this
that, but I meant the
trilogy.
trilogy. Yeah.
Yeah, the trilogy is, we'll see. I won't know that till this one's published, and then another year's gone by. So
Mhm.
maybe by the end of 2024, January, February 2025, I'll know that, but I won't know that till then.
Mhm. You never know when you are writing a book or a series of books. Oh, the other one that I found, another very compelling title, was Meeting God at the Door. And especially since you told us and you shared your background of coming from a religious household, and being that that was almost being used against you. So tell us a little bit about that, and what's the book about, and how you came
Well,
up with the idea.
11 years after that divine intervention, I had been trying to grow and overcome all this stuff and be a different person. I was succeeding. So I'd written many of the books.
Hmm.
And so now we're 2018, which is June of 2018, which is almost 5 years ago now,
Hmm.
4.5. Joy. I didn't tell you the most fun part. That woman, her name is Joy. Like, you can't make this stuff up, right?
No, you can't. You can't make that up.
Her name is Joy, right?
And we
Anyway,
all
so
we all need a little more joy in our lives.
I have perpetual joy, and she's
Hmm.
invincible. She was the other half of my business. She does all our back end work. She is our publisher. She now runs a publishing company, publishing not only my books, but client books. And
Hmm.
she has a 100% track record of Amazon #1 bestsellers.
Hmm.
So she's fabulous at all that. But
Hmm.
anyway, so Joy and I decided in 2018 to go on a cruise. And for
Hmm.
some reason, neither one of us had ever been on one before. And so we decided to go. It was in the Baltic Sea, and we visited, Oslo and
Nice.
Helsinki and Tallinn,
Hmm.
Estonia, and St. Petersburg, which will probably never happen again. But anyway, so at the end of the cruise, I got sick, came home, not early, but right at the end on Monday, and the days matter. So Monday, I got really sick. Flew home Tuesday from Oslo or from Amsterdam to Edmonton over the pole. And today, they'd throw you out of the plane window. Then they just brought you ice and towels and were nice.
Hmm.
Anyway, bad fever, and got home on Tuesday. And I didn't go to the doctor because just thought it was a bad flu and I'd get over it. So Wednesday and Thursday went by, which were day 3 and 4. And on day 5, which was of the illness, which was Friday, I finally decided I'd go to the doctor. So
Hmm.
we went to the walk-in clinic, which they have in Canada, sign in the walk-in clinic, because we went there whenever we went to anywhere. If you have a cough or something, tell the nurse. So I sent Joy in ahead of time to tell the nurse that I was pretty sick. And the nurse came out and took one look at me and said, "You can't come in here. There's nothing we can do for you. Go to the hospital right now."
Jeez.
So I, okay. So, excuse me, we went to ER, and usually you go to emerge and it might be an hour or two, or
Mhm.
maybe even 3, depends on how many people are there and all the rest. We went in there and I sat down, and in 10 minutes, they called me and they took me into a private room. I didn't even know they had private rooms. The only thing I'd ever seen was those curtains separating
Mhm.
stretchers, right?
Mhm.
Private room with a door. And I was alone. And in 10 more minutes, the doctor was there. I mean, we're talking right now. And so I thought, oh, this is not good.
Mhm.
They asked me all these questions about where I'd been, and they did all the stuff on me. And I told the story about the cruise and everything I just told you, and where I'd been, what cities, and all this other stuff. And it became quickly apparent that this was very, very serious.
Oof.
So then they said, well, we're going to admit you. We just need to find a place. And so after they said that, I sent Joy home. It was getting late in the afternoon. We have cats and dogs and,
Mhm.
all that stuff. So she went home, and then they admitted me. And then they came back in the room and said, a few minutes later, half an hour or something, yeah, we're going to move you to intensive care. I said, okay. They said, at a minimum, you have terrifying pneumonia in both lungs, but there's something else much worse, and we don't know what it is. And I thought, oh, crap. So then they came back a half an hour later and said, yeah, we're going to put you in not only in ICU, but we're going to put you in biological isolation,
Mhm.
which is double doors and the whole 9
Mhm.
yards. I thought, oh man, I've got the mystery disease from Mars. This is not good. So at that point, I decided to go into meditation. And right before I did that, they came in and asked you the question, and now it's quite late, 11 or something. You never want to hear. And the doctor came in and looked at me really
Mhm.
serious, and he said, do we have permission to intubate you and do anything we need to do to preserve your life?
Ugh.
And I looked at him and I said, what? Okay. So then I went into meditation, and I could feel, and you remember I'd written those 5 books. And so
Mhm.
meditation has been a practice that I've been using on and off, but a lot all my life. So
Mhm.
in meditation, I could feel something I'd never felt before. I could feel something like that felt like my body and spirit unzipping like a zipper. So I knew I was
Mhm.
dying. And I picked up my phone, and at this point I was trembling so badly, it was crashing, is what was happening, but I could hardly use it. And I typed a text to Joy that had 3 lines on it. First line said, I see you. Second line said, isolation/intubation.
Mm.
And the third line said, I may be dying.
Mm.
And she didn't see it because she'd gone to sleep. About 2:30 or something in the morning, she got the call from the hospital you never want to get. And the nurse said to her, are you coming? And then she saw my text. So somewhere in that night, I crashed. I coded code green, blue, red, orange, black, whatever it is. My heart
Mhm.
stopped and I died.
Mhm.
So at that time, I came to spiritually. I was horizontal, like I was on the bed. When I sat up, and the room had faded from the ICU chamber in that isolated room to
Mhm.
gray. And the walls were, everything was kind of gray, and I couldn't
Mhm.
see anybody. It's kind of like photo card gray, and it kind of a little
Mhm.
misty. I really couldn't see how big the room was.
Mhm.
But over my left shoulder, I could see a doorway, and it didn't have a door in it, but it was a doorway. And I wanted to be at the door. So then suddenly I'm standing at the door. I'm leaning on the door jamb on my right shoulder. And I noticed that across the doorway, someone was leaning on the door jamb on that side, on their shoulder, just like that close.
Mhm.
And then I noticed that it was white on that side of the door and gray on my side. And the light wasn't streaming through, it was just white on that side and gray on my side. And that individual looked at me and said, do you want to come home? And so in that space, everything. And I knew
Mhm.
who I was talking to, and I knew what the
Mhm.
doorway was, and I knew what the question meant. And so we talked about it for a while. about what I'd been doing in the 11 years since that first intervention and the changes that I'd made in my practice and everything that was going on. And finally I said, well, I'm not done. And he said, okay. And I'm quite sure that's when they were able to restart my heart. The next day, and people ask all the time, how do you know it was the next day? And the answer is, I have no idea. I was in a coma for 17 days.
Wow.
So the next day I'm back at the doorway, exactly the same setup. And the conversation of the previous day didn't come up because that was decided. And of course, outside they had restarted my heart. But I'm back at the door and we're standing there. And then, the question was, okay, so what are you going to do? You're going to stay. So what are you going to do? So we talked about the work that I had been doing and everything. And then I had an experience. And the only thing I can use to compare it to is, have you ever seen the movie Contact with Jodie Foster?
Yes.
Okay, well, when she goes through that thing and takes off, I felt like two things. One, I was being fed with a fire hose. And two, if I hadn't been in some kind of a protective bubble, I would have been incinerated in an instant. And I saw all kinds of stuff and just, it felt long and glorious. And so then at the end, and obviously I have no idea how long it was, but it felt like a very long time. We're back at the door and four pillars became really, really clear. And here they are. Number one, each one of us is an intentional, lovingly, carefully crafted divine being, period. Number two, each one of us was intentionally, lovingly, purposefully given gifts for this experience. Number three, we each not only have a mission and purpose that we not only agreed to, but we were stoked about before we came. And number four, all the help we need is available from both sides of that door. And so I said, well, since that's true, and often in a situation like that, you say, well, that's true, but standing there, you don't say if. So I said, since that's true, why do we settle for crumbs? And I don't know if in the economy of heaven, brevity is a virtue, but the answer was 4 words. He looked at me and he said, because you don't believe. And, I didn't facepalm. I felt like it. But I'm like, okay, what can I do about that? Oh, glad you asked. So what came next was a framework about how to change beliefs that I wrote in the companion book called the Book of Context. And I didn't include it in Meeting God at the Door because, number one, it was too long. And number two, it was really a different topic. So it was about how to change even persistent, long-standing beliefs, of process to use, instead of fighting like we do often with trying to force change, white-knuckled stuff.
Right.
So that was long. And that second conversation was very, very long, it felt like. But anyway, so that ended. And the third day, I'm back at the door. And this time I'm excited. I'm buzzing. It's kind of like some dude sitting on one of those bouncy chairs on a desk, right? I'm bouncing up and down and I'm repeating all the stuff in my mind over and over again, the principles and the stuff in the Book of Context. And I'm pretty excited. And we're back. And this time it was just one question. And he looked at me and he said, are you sure? And I thought, what do you mean, am I sure? What? And it's almost like I was hyperventilating, right? I thought, am I stupid? Am I biting off more than I can chew? Have I missed something here? Like, what? Am I sure? So I felt, right? And so we talked about that from every possible angle. And I realized that, yes, I could do this. And yes, the help I needed was available. And yes, I really wanted to. And so finally I said, well, yes, I'm sure. Okay. And nothing was said, but the conversation ended with a finality that I knew we were done.
Mhm.
And so then some 14 days after that, assuming those were 3, then I came out of a coma, and I had lost 35 pounds. I couldn't walk. I couldn't do anything. My lungs were totally
Wow.
destroyed. They told me what the head of the infectious disease department at the University of Alberta, that's where the hospital was, they told me that what I had a 10-day kill rate of 100%. So we talk in COVID about 1 and 2%. He said the 10-day kill rate of this was 100%.
Wow.
So what it turned out to be was a necrotizing MRSA that
Wow.
I had in both lungs and in my bloodstream. I was completely infected. It was so bad that they couldn't get the bacteria count to go down. They figured out that the bacteria had lodged in the tube that was in my neck, and they had to pull it out of one side and put it in the other.
Oh.
It was that aggressive. And so
So when you
the
say the tube
reason
in your neck, are you talking about like an IV tube or something, or are
I
you
don't know
talking
what it
about
was.
the
I have no idea. No, I had a tracheal tube too.
yeah, I
I had a
figured.
hole in my throat. I had one in my stuff in my
Right.
neck. I don't know. I was unconscious during the entire time.
Good
So
thing.
in meeting God at the door, I wrote about it from 2 perspectives. I wrote all that happened, and then I also wrote about what was going on outside that I got from Joy, because Joy practically lived there
Mhm.
during that time and was all over the doctors when my blood pressure was this and this and
Mhm.
this. And they had filled me with every high powered and experimental antibiotic known to man. They
Mhm.
didn't figure out what I had until Monday night, which was day 8.
Mhm.
That was after I was already dead, and the whole thing had happened. They finally figured out what it was.
Mhm. So, I mean, I'm a medical person. I don't know if you knew that. I was a respiratory therapist for almost 20 years, and now I'm a
Oh, no.
physical therapist. So, the necrotizing pneumonia, the necrotizing MRSA, that just kind of blows me away. And I'm really curious, do you have any residual effects of that?
Yeah, they told me when I left the hospital. I asked them, the different doctor told me it was the worst pneumonia he'd ever seen in his entire career. And I asked him if I'd ever get my lungs back, because I had done martial arts and all kinds of stuff all my
Mhm.
life. I had a resting pulse of 46, and
Mhm.
I'm that. And I asked them if I'd ever get my lungs back, and they said 2 years to never. And so today I had to relearn to walk. I was completely, like I said, I'd lost 35 pounds. I looked like a
Right.
survivor from a concentration camp. Um, Today I still have some an inhaled corticosteroid that I use every day,
Mhm.
uh, Brio, since you know that stuff.
Mhm.
That's pretty much all. I have an inhaler that I carry around that I rarely use,
Right.
but it's I probably am back at about 75 to 80%
Wow.
lung
That's
function.
incredible. So I'm really curious because, of course, since you do meditate and that's part of your life, do you think that your meditation practice had something to do with that? Once you got out of the hospital and was able to function a little bit better, did you go back to the meditation?
Oh, of course.
Hmm.
That's part of my daily routine. When you ask about processes to help with this is the time to tell you that there are 2 things that I've done
Hmm.
and that matter more than anything else. And one of them is to create a document that I call a PTAC, a personal truth and commitment.
Hmm.
And it is nothing more than or less than a declaration that is sacred. And it needs, nobody gave me permission and nobody has to agree, but it's a declaration of who I am in the world and in the universe with respect to myself, my soul, my creator, my own soul contract. This is a declaration,
Hmm.
and it's long, and I have it memorized, and it is um, carries the ultimate power. When I recite
Hmm.
it and look at myself and say it is infinitely powerful. Now, the thing that gives that life is I have a ritual, morning ritual, and everybody talks about morning routines, morning
Hmm.
rituals. I don't know why God created us to make us sleep away a third of our lives, but he did. So since we die every night and get reborn every morning, essentially, it is essential for you to intentionally create yourself every day. Who are you? And again, this needs no one's permission and no one's agreement. It is simply because you say so. And one of the things I hope my clients understand is the most powerful words in the language are because I said so. That that commitment, that saying carries infinite power. You don't need anyone else's agreement or permission. You don't need to know how. You don't need to know anything. You declare who you are because you said so. And then you go do whatever it is that occurs to you to do with that. And that might include learning or taking a course or hiring a coach or standing on your head or writing a book or doing whatever it is. But having created that kind of a document and then having a daily creation process that includes that to remind, and you're free to change it and adjust it and do whatever, but that it reminds you of your declaration in a visceral and powerful way. That is infinite power.
I love it. Infinite power. That's amazing. So tell us a little bit more about your coaching practice and who you work with, how you work with them. Just go ahead and take it away.
I started as calling myself a business coach because I'd had, C-suite experience and run also some individual businesses. I had a recording studio on the side for decades and all kinds of stuff. And then I was a coach for speaking coach because I did that, and presentation because I know how to work with the camera and all those kinds of things. And what I realized after some years of doing this, that all of those things are decorations. And the only thing that matters, and this is what I do, I work, and each individual is the curriculum. And the only question that matters is who are you going to be in the world? And you declare that, and we work together to figure out what that is. Who are you? What does that look like? And that is a choice you get to make. It is an exploration at the very deepest level of who the hell you say you are and why, and what does that person show up like. If you declare yourself, one of the things in my PTAC is I am, excuse me, I am my word. I speak only truth. I do what I say, and I am who I seem with no camouflage, duplicity, or guile. And that's a declaration, and it is truth. And that means every word that I say, every book that I write, every person that I coach, every conference I speak at, every podcast interview goes through that filter. So I am my word. And this is emotional because it carries that kind of power. It is a choice. I don't need anybody's permission or agreement. And one of the statements, because all these statements are bold and declarative, is I am that when I fall or fail in any declaration, I get up, fess up, clean it up, and recommit. And so it allows you to be human, but it doesn't allow you to be wishy-washy. And so coaching is the question I have for people is, are you ready to decide who you are and live into it? However your circumstances allow. I don't care if you work, you have a job and you want to go create a business, or if you want to do this, or if you want to change your relationship with the divine or with a partner or anything else. It all depends on who you say you are.
And if I can add a little bit, you can do this at any age, at any stage of life.
I didn't start till I was 52. I'm 67 now. And so one of the things that these experiences have taught me is it doesn't matter where you are. It
Mhm.
doesn't matter who has done what to you or what you have done. Your choice at this moment is what direction do you want to face right now, and where do you want to go right now?
That to me is an incredibly powerful statement. And, thank you for sharing that with the audience because that really does kind of highlight that you can change your life at any time.
Well, if you don't, you're going to stay where you are. You're
Mhm.
going to stay the same. You're going to Groundhog Day the rest of your life. You're free to do that.
Mhm.
You are free. No one's going to make you. And if you want to stay married to the reasons or excuses or circumstances that have governed your life to now, you're free to do that. But you don't have to.
Mhm.
And whether you do it, it may or may not be abrupt. It may be 1% at a time.
Mhm.
Sometimes people say, well, I can't. This is just the way I am. And the truth of that is, I believe you. And what you're
Mhm.
saying is, this is how I have been until this moment. And my
Mhm.
question then is, what would you do if you took 1% more responsibility for XYZ today? Just 1%.
Mhm.
What would that look like? Well, I'd make one more phone call, or I would do this. Or, okay, cool. Can you do that one thing? Okay.
Mhm.
And then tomorrow and tomorrow. And it doesn't take very long.
Right. I think people get overwhelmed or intimidated thinking they have to change everything at once in their entire life. And that's not only overwhelming, it's not realistic. But the baby steps, that one small thing, it really adds up. I like to think of it as putting that change, your pocket change in a bucket. It's like, okay, it's just a few pennies here or, some change. It doesn't mean anything. But at the end of a month, that bucket's full. And it was not very painful getting that.
I did that. I did that actually with change for a while, and pretty
Mhm.
soon I had several $100s in this jar.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it's true, and it's true at any time. That Nathaniel Brandon, who's dead now, wrote several books about personal responsibility, and he talked about 1% or 3%. Like, you can take 1% more responsibility for anything.
Mhm.
It doesn't. And the idea that you're suddenly going to change everything all at once, God didn't even create the world that way. So no plants grow that way. No, like, I had a story I tell is I had a orange tree we planted when we lived in Phoenix, and it grew well because we watered it and the soil's good there. Um, if you water it, there's the water problem. But anyway, so at the first year, it didn't produce any fruit.
Mhm.
Now, I could have gotten mad and ripped it out and said, "Oh, stupid tree, doesn't work." But if you're patient, then what you realize is, well, they don't. And on the
Mhm.
second year, then they started producing fruit. And by the third year, we got lots of oranges. So,
Mhm.
you took 3 years to get really good. Second year, some, third year, really well. And so, if that's how everything works, why would our growth be any different? We've been contaminated by the
Mhm.
idea that everything needs to be solvable in the length of a TV sitcom,
Mhm.
which
Or
is not true.
or that we're addicted to instant gratification and
Yeah,
we
I say
want it
we live
now.
in a download and double click world,
Yeah.
and that's not true. It's not how anything works.
Yeah. So, Kellen, where can people find you? How could they learn even more about you, find your books, your music, connect with you or contact you if they want to? Where can they find you?
So, with a name like Kellan Fluckiger, it's hard to hide. Um, I'm active on Facebook right now. For the last 100 and something days, I've been doing a daily live called Road to 50 Million, which
Mhm.
is what I'm doing every day to reach 50 million people this year. My year starts October 14th. So I'm coming up on 5 months into that. And the reason it starts October 14th is because that's Joy's birthday.
Mm.
So anyway, so I'm on social media, um, and I'm easy to contact, LinkedIn, YouTube,
Mhm.
Facebook, Instagram. I don't do any of the other ones.
Mhm. And you have a spectacular website.
Yeah, my website's my name, and when I went to get that, it was real easy. I paid $2 because who else wants KellanFluckiger.com, right? So my books are on Amazon under my name. If you go on Spotify and put in my name, I've got at this point 82 songs, but I've got 3 more that are going up in the next week or two
Okay,
that are part of
wonderful.
that third album from that
Hmm.
next tightrope book. So I'm not hard to find. If all you have to do is you do have to spell my name right. But if you Google my name because of my executive career and what I'm doing now, there's tens of thousands of things. My testimony from Congress a long time ago is still there. And
Wow.
so, there's lots of, if you can't find me, you're not looking very
Ex-
hard.
That's what I tell people all the time. If they can't find me, that they're not looking.
Yeah.
And what else did I want to ask you? Oh my gosh, it was something with the Congress. I can't remember what it was. Oh, yes. And they can hire you as a speaker. If they look on your website, anybody who wants to hire you as a speaker can do it through there. Is that true?
Yeah, my email is coachkellanflukiger@gmail.com. If you're interested, actually the one to use is meetwithkellan@gmail.com. But anyway, either one works, but Meet with Kellan is preferable because that goes to my booking people and teams, stuff like that. But I'm available to talk. The talk I'm going to give today is called Living Without Fear, which is the name of one of the books that I wrote.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, because after I had that near-death experience, I got out of the hospital in July. In October, by October, I could walk, and I was
Mm-hmm.
weak, but I could walk. So I went on,
Mm-hmm.
I guess, a tour. I had 4 events in 4 weeks and spoke. And at one of them, it was a Q&A afterwards. And some lady in the audience, she asked me, so what most profound change for you? Predictable question, right? And I hadn't really prepared anything. So I started thinking about it. While I was thinking, I heard my mouth open and say, I no longer experience fear, which is true.
Mm-hmm.
And so then later thinking about it later, that spawned the book, Walking Without Fear.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, Kellan, this has just been a fantastic conversation. I am so grateful to you for coming onto the show, sharing your story, and all of those pearls of wisdom that you have been dropping along the way too, those golden nuggets. I really do appreciate that. Before we sign off, do you have one final pearl of wisdom, key point that you would like to leave with the audience for them to think about?
I do. And people, I used to do this. I used to think, well, that's good. All that cool stuff's good for them, but I'm different. I don't have, and then I would list whatever it is that I thought I didn't have. So I can't XYZ. And so in order to make this, I'm going to tell you a little story. A few years after this thing in 2007, when I was building this, before I started speaking a lot, I went to a conference put on by Bo Eason, who is a very well-known, renowned speaker. He teaches people how to tell stories and how to use your story and everything else. And he told a story. He's done a Broadway play, one-man play, 1,200 times or something. He has some 40,000 hours on stage, et cetera, et
Jeez.
cetera. He's one of the top guys in the world. Anyway, he told this story, and we're all riveted and sitting on the edge of our seats. And the point of it, he took it apart, taught us how he did it and everything, and then he wanted to sell us into a 3-day conference to do that, which was fine. It's an upsell, and I'm sure it was spectacular. Here's the point. As it got near the end, I was riveted like everybody else. And then I got angry and I was frustrated. And I was so frustrated that I was in tears. And I got up and stomped out of the conference. And here's what I said. Yeah, I could do that because I had spoken a lot as an executive.
Mm-hmm.
I could do that too if I had a story like his. But me, I got nothing. That's what I said. Stomping out of the conference in tears. Me, I got nothing. Okay. And people laugh, just like you did,
Mm-hmm.
because I was so convinced I had nothing. That's what my reaction, my visceral, emotional reaction to that. And so here's the nugget. I don't care what you think about that right now. I don't care how old you are. I don't care what you
Mm.
think you do or don't have. You are still, right this minute, capable of everything you want to create, and you
Mm.
have everything you need to create it, no matter where you've been, if you choose to take advantage of it.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thanks for that. And thank you again for being on the show. I absolutely loved our conversation. I do want you to keep in touch. I would love to hear about upcoming books. And when you are done with the trilogy, I'm really curious about that as well.
Thanks very much. And again, I want to honor you for the work that you're doing.
Oh,
It is so
thank you.
needed and so important. So thank you for who you choose to be in the world.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And do tell Joy I said hello.
I will.
And everybody, thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. Please do share this episode with everybody you know. There are so many really important principles in there, so many life lessons, so much valuable tips. And so please do share, leave a 5-star review for on Apple. I'd really appreciate that. I would love you forever, but I'm going to love you forever anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And do remember to intentionally create yourself every single day because you are worth it. And that is the way of the FemiNinja.